It began like a scene ripped from the worst kind of courtroom drama, the kind where the gavel means nothing and dignity is in short supply. It was a cold, gray Tuesday morning. Rain drizzled steadily outside the windows of the Jefferson County Courthouse, casting muted shadows across the marble floor. Inside, the docket was behind schedule, the judge was irritable, and no one seemed to care about anything more than getting through the day. That's when the bailiff dragged in the man. He was older, frail. His wrists were bound in plastic cuffs. His coat was torn and soaked, strands of rainwater dripping onto the polished floor behind him like ink bleeding from a forgotten pen. His shoes didn't match. His hair was matted against his scalp, his face bruised and swollen, and he mumbled as he walked, soft, incoherent syllables, like he was apologizing to the floor for existing. In the gallery, some turned away, a few out of pity, most out of something closer to disdain. To them, he was just another name on the docket, one more unwanted soul swept into the system for loitering too close to something that mattered. Judge Harold Whitman adjusted his robe, rolled his eyes, and slammed the gavel down hard. "Clear this nonsense from my docket," he barked, not bothering to hide the irritation in his voice. "This is a courtroom, not a homeless shelter." The man had been charged with trespassing. Nothing major. He'd been found sleeping outside the courthouse the night before, curled up on the steps with a folded American flag as his pillow. The detail made people laugh. Ironic, some said. Pathetic, others added. A man like him using the flag for warmth? As if the country it represented hadn't already discarded him. The prosecutor smirked as he leaned in to whisper something to Judge Whitman. The judge chuckled loudly, clearly for effect. "The defendant claims the flag belonged to his father." "Touching," he said with mock sympathy. "Maybe next time he'll sleep with the Constitution and plead patriotism." That got laughs, light, cruel chuckles that echoed across the courtroom's high ceiling. Until the door creaked open. It was slow, deliberate, the sound of heels on tile commanding attention. Heads turned. And then silence. A woman walked in, crisp in a tailored black suit. Eyes sharp. Presence unmistakable. Some recognized her instantly. Charlotte Monroe. Former U.S. Attorney. Civil rights advocate. A legal tactician whose name carried more weight than the judge's robe. "I suppose I'm in the wrong courtroom, then," she said calmly, her voice cool but cutting. Judge Whitman's face twitched. "Ms. Monroe, I wasn't aware you were involved in this matter." "I am now," she replied, never breaking stride as she walked past the prosecutor's table. "I'm representing the defendant. His name is Nathaniel Briggs, and I suggest you remember it." Something in the way she said it, low and deliberate, made the air shift. The judge leaned forward, posture stiff. "Ms. Monroe, this man was found sleeping against a federal building. He disturbed the peace. The evidence is clear." "No," Charlotte said. "What's clear is that you didn't care enough to ask a single question before deciding who he was." The room froze. Even the bailiff paused when Charlotte knelt beside Nathaniel, adjusting his sleeve gently. He blinked at her, as if not entirely sure she was real. His lips trembled. She didn't flinch. "Don't," she told the bailiff as he took a step forward. "Your grandstanding," the judge grumbled, "is inappropriate. This is a court of law." "Then let's start acting like it," she shot back. The prosecutor flipped open a folder. "We have security footage." The defendant was verbally combative. Potentially dangerous. "Let's see it," Charlotte said. The monitor flickered to life. A grainy video appeared. It showed two security guards nudging Nathaniel awake. His movements were slow, unthreatening. But as the guards began yelling, he raised his voice only once. "I fought for this damn country," he said. "Now I'm not even allowed to sleep in it." More laughter from the gallery, but this time it was uneasy. No one quite knew where the line had moved. Charlotte didn't flinch. "He was holding a flag when he was arrested," she said, voice just above a whisper. "Did anyone ask where it came from?" The room fell silent. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed plastic pouch. Inside, a dog tag, worn, weathered, unmistakably real. She held it up under the fluorescent lights. This tag was found in his coat. Nathaniel Briggs, United States Marine Corps. Serial number ending in 47B. That places him in active duty during Desert Storm. Judge Whitman blinked. Charlotte scanned the room. "How many of you knew that before you left?" No one answered. She turned to Nathaniel. His eyes brimmed with tears, and still he said nothing. Silence had been his companion for years. The media coverage exploded that afternoon. "Charlotte Monroe defends homeless man with military past," screamed one headline. "Patriot or pretender?" asked another. Online, battle lines were drawn. Some mocked her. Others called her brave. Still others tried to discredit Nathaniel entirely. Cable networks rolled edited clips, stripping context and twisting narrative. But inside her office, Charlotte worked. She called contacts in the Department of Defense, dug through databases, chased every fragment of paper, and what she found didn't make sense. Nathaniel Briggs didn't exist. No discharge file, no benefits, no record. And yet the dog tag was real. She had seen fakes. This wasn't one. The etching, the wear, the date formatting authentic. More than that, Nathaniel had never claimed to be a hero, never asked for recognition. He just disappeared. Back in court, the assistant DA smirked again. "There's no record," he said. "Your Honor, for all we know, he bought that tag at a flea market." Charlotte stepped forward. "Then explain this." She clicked a remote. The projector lit up with a photograph. 5 Marines crouched behind a jeep, dust and smoke swirling behind them. One of the men, young, fierce-eyed, tired, was circled in red. That was taken during Operation Vigilant Warrior, 1994. 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. The circled man is Sergeant Nathaniel Briggs, identified by 2 surviving unit members. Judge Whitman shifted in his chair. "Still doesn't prove misconduct," the prosecutor said weakly. Charlotte nodded. "No, but this does." She pulled out a letter, yellowed, creased, official. A personal commendation from General Elias Radford, commending Briggs for bravery under fire, apologizing for a discharge that was filed incorrectly. And quietly, gasps echoed. Charlotte's voice dropped. He was never given benefits, never given housing, just sent home. Forgotten. Judge Whitman looked down, lips pressed tight. The prosecutor opened his mouth, but no sound came. Charlotte stepped forward again. "You laughed at a man who bled for that flag." The gallery sat stunned. That night, smear campaigns intensified. Social media lit up with accusations. Clips of Nathaniel cursing during his arrest were looped endlessly. A hashtag began trending. #UnstableVet. But outside the courthouse, something was building. Veterans began gathering, saluting, holding signs. Inside, Charlotte sat with Nathaniel. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered. "I did," she said. The next morning, she walked into the courtroom without a briefcase. Just a manila folder and a glinting dog tag. "The court claimed he didn't exist," she began. "But the truth is he was erased." She held up the folder. "This is a classified file, unsealed last night." Nathaniel Briggs served in a covert Marine unit conducting high-risk rescues between 1994 and 1996. His records were sealed for national security, then forgotten. She read from the folder, extractions, ambushes, a Silver Star, and a Medal of Honor nomination that never saw daylight. Silence. Until someone stood. An older man, chest decorated with ribbons. "I served with him," he said, "and I watched our country forget." The room erupted. Judge Whitman tried to control the chaos, but it was too late. Then came the final blow. Charlotte stepped forward again. "I move for recusal," she said, holding up a flash drive. "It contains recordings of Judge Whitman mocking my client in private, coordinating with officials to bury this case." Stunned silence. Minutes later, 2 men in suits walked in. "Judge Whitman," one said, "you're under federal investigation." He went pale, muttered something about slander, but no one listened. As he was escorted out, Charlotte placed a hand on Nathaniel's shoulder. He didn't smile, just looked forward. Calm, present, unforgotten. Weeks later, he stood on the steps of the Capitol. A new suit, a folded flag in his lap. Charlotte stood beside him as the Secretary of Defense announced his reinstatement. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice rang out, "Sergeant Nathaniel Briggs." Cheers followed. He approached the podium slowly. "I thought I didn't matter," he said softly. "But one person remembered. One person believed." He held up the dog tag. "This used to remind me who I was. Now it proves who I still am." And the nation listened. Across the country, veterans came forward. Files reopened. Laws were introduced. Operation Restore Honor was born. At a small gathering that evening, a boy tugged Charlotte's sleeve. "Are you the lawyer who helped the soldier?" She nodded. "I want to be like you," he said. She knelt. "Then remember," she whispered, "courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just refusing to look away." And that is what made her a hero. Not the courtroom victories, not the press, but the moment she looked at a broken man and said, "You still matter," and meant it. The morning after the Capitol ceremony, the courthouse looked different, not in appearance, but in spirit. Dozens of veterans stood outside, arms crossed, flags in hand. Students, young lawyers, journalists, they had all come, not just to witness the next hearing, but to stand as proof that the system was being watched now. No one would be erased in silence again. Inside, the courtroom was tense. A special federal judge had been flown in overnight to replace Whitman. Judge Eleanor Hayes was known for her impartiality and iron spine. She walked in, gray hair pulled tightly into a bun, expression unreadable. The matter of Nathaniel Briggs versus the state of Virginia will now proceed, she said, adjusting her glasses. Miss Monroe, you may continue. Charlotte stood. The weight of months of scrutiny, attacks, and doubt hung behind her, but so did the truth. Your Honor, she began. What began as a misdemeanor trespassing case has revealed something much deeper. A hidden record, a systemic betrayal, and a man who was discarded by the very nation he once risked his life to protect. She paused. Her voice remained level, but emotion trembled just below the surface. I move for a full dismissal of all charges against Sergeant Briggs, with prejudice, along with a federal mandate for the restoration of all veteran benefits due to him. Additionally, I submit a formal petition to expunge his arrest record and an immediate issuance of a public statement from this court acknowledging the wrongdoing. The courtroom held its breath. The prosecutor, now replaced by a federal attorney after the scandal broke, stood slowly, no longer cocky, no longer grinning. The United States does not oppose this motion, he said. In fact, we support it. Gasps, soft and stunned, rippled through the gallery. Judge Hayes nodded once, firm. Then let the record reflect. Charges are dismissed. All legal and civil rights restored to Sergeant Nathaniel Briggs, effective immediately. And let this courtroom never forget the cost of forgetting. The gavel struck. And this time, it meant something. Applause broke out. Not loud, not wild, but steady, dignified. Charlotte turned to Nathaniel. He had not cried through any of this. Not during the hearings, the exposés, or the accusations. But in that moment, a single tear fell. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown. What began as a handful of veterans had turned into hundreds. They didn't cheer. They stood in formation, silent, saluting, waiting. As Nathaniel walked down the courthouse steps, flanked by Charlotte, the veterans parted like a tide. At the base of the steps, a young Marine stood at attention and handed him something wrapped in navy velvet. Sir, he said, his voice tight with pride. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps, welcome home. Inside the velvet was a newly minted silver star and an official citation signed by the Secretary of Defense. Nathaniel stared at it for a long moment, then looked up. I didn't fight for this, he said quietly. Charlotte answered, I know, but I'll accept it, for the ones who didn't come home to hear their name again. That night, the story of Nathaniel Briggs made national headlines again, but this time not as a scandal, not as controversy, but as the beginning of a reckoning. Editorials across the country demanded audits of veteran record systems. State officials scrambled to uncover similar cases. Entire legal departments were tasked with unsealing forgotten files. Pam Bondi, once targeted and mocked, was now the name behind a wave of justice reform. Her legal foundation tripled in donations. Veterans' families reached out by the thousands. Some with dog tags, others with photos, all with the same plea. Can you help us be seen? A week later, Nathaniel and Charlotte returned to the National Veterans Memorial. This time, not as visitors, but as speakers. In front of a quiet audience, Nathaniel stood at the same podium where his name had first been restored. I've been invisible for a long time, he said. But now, when people see me, I hope they see every man and woman still waiting for justice. Still hoping someone, anyone, will say their name. He turned to Charlotte. And I hope they see her too. Because justice doesn't start in court. It starts when someone refuses to stop looking. The applause that followed wasn't for fame. It was for truth. Later, walking through rows of names etched in stone, Nathaniel stopped and knelt beside a blank plaque. What are you doing? Charlotte asked softly. Saving a place, he said. For someone else who hasn't been found yet. Charlotte placed her hand on his shoulder. They will be. As the sun began to set, the two stood in silence, bathed in orange light, wind brushing through flags lined row after row. The nation, still flawed, still struggling, had remembered something precious. Honor, even if delayed, could still be given. And in the hush that followed, it wasn't the roar of crowds or the blare of headlines that defined the moment. It was something quieter. It was the sound of a man, once discarded, now seen, and the quiet, resolute voice of the woman beside him who never let him vanish again. The country had moved on, but this time it took him with it.